Vanity is definitely my favorite sin.
He was not the megastar we all know and love now.
You don't really want to go back to Florida, though, do you?
He was approached for the part multiple times and turned it down multiple times.
I don't like it here, Kevin.
It's my time now.
The late 1990s had an odd fascination with the devil and the end of days that gave audiences all kinds of crazy films with varied levels of success. Most of these seem to come out right around 1999, the end of the millennium, when people were starting to panic. However, some of these end of days films came out earlier and set the trend. 1997 was an odd year that saw the release of Dante's Peak, The Devil's Own, Volcano, the original Open Your Eyes, 7 Years in Tibet, and a bunch more. There was a trend for the end of days, but also a search for religion, which then led to the perfect storm of both, with The Devil's Advocate. A bit end of days, a bit of religious mayhem, and a whole lot of cautionary tale. In 1997, folks were getting ready for the big millennium change, but not quite as scared as some would get come 1999. There was a bit of apprehension, but the madness hadn't all started yet. Still, religious horror films had been around for a long, long time, and getting one more was not exactly surprising. The Exorcist and its sequels, The Wicker Man, The Believers, and many others had come and gone, some leaving more of a mark than others did. Movies about the devil or Lucifer had come and gone the same way, including some about the devil's children or the devil wanting children. One only needs to see The Omen or Rosemary's Baby for that. We even had movies about Paradise Lost, such as The Crow, and there is even a film in Limbo that would directly adapt the piece and be directed by Alex Proyas. So, is The Devil's Advocate about Paradise Lost? Well, yes and no. It's definitely not a direct adaptation of the poem by John Milton, but it does connect in multiple ways with it. The story here is that of a young lawyer, Kevin Lomax, from Florida, who's offered a huge opportunity in New York City for one of the biggest law firms there is, and under a mysterious man named John Milton. As the young man convinces his wife to go to New York City with him, the opportunity he's offered seems to be a bit more unusual than expected. There, they meet people of power, people with ridiculous amounts of money, and people with very low morality. This is a brand new world for them, and while Mr. Lomax has some inner searching to do while things are being offered to him, his wife seems to lose her mind as she attempts to be supportive. The new boss is no cakewalk either, seemingly knowing more than he should and obviously ready to do just about anything to reach his end goal. And, as with any good movie about evil beings wanting to keep going on, there's a lineage angle to it all. A bit like Coffin Joe, John Milton is as obsessed with having his bloodline go on, no matter what. And, well, there's the spoiler alert, very Star Wars twist coming that won't shock all that many viewers, to be honest. So, with that out of the way, what happened to this movie? Why is it of interest? Well, the devil is in the details. Looking at the numbers, the film should be considered a hit. The budget for The Devil's Advocate was right around $57 million, and the box office total for it is $153 million. So, just under 3 times its budget, giving some leeway for marketing and distribution costs, as well as other costs never discussed, while still having some profit left over. The film released in prime devil season, right in the middle of October, with a solid marketing move even if other horror films were coming out that month. The box office for the weekend of its release, October the 17th, 1997, shows The Devil's Advocate at number 2, pulling in just under $16.5 million. At number 1, another new release that week and another horror film, I Know What You Did Last Summer, which pulled in just over $20 million. The big difference between the two films? Well, one was aiming at a more adult horror audience, while the other was aiming at teenagers and young adults. This is the prime horror audience to this day. So, it was easy to guess that I Know What You Did Last Summer would win at the box office. Right behind them were the previous week's numbers 1 and 2, Kiss the Girls and 7 Years in Tibet, If we take a look at the following week's box office, the rankings for the weekend of October the 24th, 1997, remained exactly the same, with The Devil's Advocate in second, making $13.5 million. Week 3 kept the same top two. The Devil's Advocate made just about $10 million, and at week 4, the four down the charts started with the 4th position, showing behind I Know What You Did Last Summer, Bean, yes, that Bean, jumping at number 2 after coming out on the same date as The Devil's Advocate, something possibly due to Halloween season being over. At number 1, Starship Troopers. All in all, The Devil's Advocate had a solid box office return, declining week to week as would be expected for horror in November. These days, the cast of this film would sell out more screenings than a lot of other movies. But in 1997, Al Pacino had a solid following, but Keanu Reeves has not hit his biggest hit yet and was not known as Neo or John Wick. He was the guy most people saw as Ted from the Bill and Ted movies, or as Jonathan Harker from Coppola's Dracula, or as the lead from Speed and Point Break, but he was not the megastar we all know and love now. We knew much less about him, and he was one of many men in their early 30s vying for the public's attention. He was a great choice here, but not necessarily the obvious one. Case in point, the film's production. While under Joel Schumacher had considered hiring Brad Pitt, Edward Norton, Christian Slater, and John Cusack for the part of Kevin Lomax. As for the part of John Milton, it wasn't easy to get Al Pacino for it. He was approached for the part multiple times and turned it down multiple times. Eventually, the script was reworked a few times and he became more interested. Not before suggesting that Robert Redford or Sean Connery should play the part instead. However, the film as we know it was meant to have him. But the budget didn't agree with this, and there wasn't quite enough to get Mr. Pacino for the part of John Milton. All was not lost though, as this is a Keanu Reeves movie, and something people didn't know at the time, and we do know now, is how he gets what he wants by just being a nice guy. Here, he wanted Pacino as a co-star, so he accepted a reduced salary for his part so that the budget could be there to pay for Pacino. In a happy turn of events, when Pacino found out about this, he took the amount that would have been Reeves and donated it to charity. Some would say, why not give it back to Reeves? Well, have you read about the man in the last few years? Yeah, he didn't need it and was okay with the money not going to himself. And he's a charity giving kind of guy, so it made sense then and makes even more sense now. Joining the leads here is someone who is more of a newcomer on the scene and a lot younger than expected. She was to play Lomax's wife, so with Keanu Reeves being 31, it would have been logical to expect someone around his age. However, talent won over age, and maybe a touch of beauty here, leading to 21-year-old Charlize Theron being chosen for the part. Her own career was just beginning, with only 5 roles before this one, including one horror film, Children of the Corn 3, Urban Harvest, thus proving that just about every A-lister has a bad horror film on their resume. She wasn't super well known, she wasn't the star we know her to be now, she hadn't been nominated for any Oscars or won one. She was a pretty girl with loads of talent and potential. She was also a newcomer who was worried about the nudity required for this film. She's since admitted that she's discussed this with her mother, as the part called for nudity, full frontal, in a church even, which is something that could kill her career this early on and could limit her work for years to come. This was a major risk. She weighed the pros and cons and eventually she went for it. As a side note, the nudity in the church scene was done with a priest's approval, who thought that this was the logical place for someone who's lost to go to look for guidance. This central cast here is a large part of why the film works and why people keep going back to it. Now, looking at the behind the scenes talent, starting with the director, there is talent in abundance. The director here is Taylor Hackford, whose name is not instantly recognisable, but a quick look at his resume shows solid films and some random choices, including Against All Odds in 1984 and Dolores Claiborne in 1995. He'd also directed a bunch of music videos, which seems to be a rite of passage for most horror directors. Since The Devil's Advocate, he's directed a slew of films including Ray in 2004, and Parker in 2013, showing that his work is, well, all over the place. In terms of writers, the movie's based on a novella by Andrew Niederman, who also wrote the source material for Pin in 1988, The Maddening 1995, and Tender Love and Care from 1996. Adapting the novella were Jonathan Lemkin and Tony Gilroy. Lemkin had previous credits that show a seemingly solid career with Moonlighting, Hill Street Blues, and 21 Jump Street before The Devil's Advocate. Gilroy, for his part, had done movies including The Cutting Edge, Dolores Claiborne, and Extreme Measures. There was plenty of talent to go around here, but these men were not necessarily household names at the time. With all this talent involved, how did the film do with critics and the public? Well, the public seemed to like it enough, with 80% of them liking it according to Rotten Tomatoes, if the stats from that website hold any weight for you. As for the critics, they were not all on board. The film currently stands at 63%, with a consensus that seems to say it's just okay, with some decent supernatural elements, while being too ambitious for its own good. So, as with many other films out there, the public seems to have liked it more than the critics, and shown that at the box office for a few weeks when the film was first released. At this point, the film's finding new audiences through their love of Keanu Reeves, something they can't be blamed for, and the added nostalgia for the 1990s that's been seeping into pop culture lately. The film is a solid one with some issues here and there. It's a fun watch to get to see a very young Charlize Theron be a badass.
I don't care!
And Keanu Reeves do his thing, while Al Pacino oversees the whole thing in his own unique way.